In 1943, while the government was rationing everything from sugar to rubber, a woman in rural Ohio was producing more fresh greens in her kitchen than her neighbors were growing in their entire backyards, and she wasn't using a single handful of dirt. Her name was Edna. She had 3 kids, a husband overseas, and a windowsill no bigger than a kitchen table. Every week, she pulled handfuls of crisp living greens from a row of old gallon buckets lined up by the window. Spinach, mustard greens, arugula. Not scraggly little sprouts. Full, dense, lush growth that fed her family through a winter. When fresh produce was nearly impossible to find at any price, her neighbors thought she had some kind of gift. She didn't. She had a method. And that method, right now, is something I'm going to walk you through step by step. Here's what nobody in the gardening industry wants you to figure out. They've made growing food sound complicated on purpose. Think about how much money depends on you believing that you need special soil, special fertilizer, special raised beds, special pH testers, and a yard. Garden centers in this country pull in over $50 billion a year. That number doesn't stay that high if people start growing food in buckets in their kitchens for basically nothing. So the entire system, the stores, the magazines, the YouTube channels sponsored by seed companies, they all quietly steer you toward complexity, toward products, toward dependence. You've always felt like something was off about how hard they make this seem. You were right, because what Edna knew, what families across this country knew during rationing, what communities in Eastern Europe knew through multiple generations of food shortages, what certain self-sufficient communities still practice today, is that greens don't need dirt to thrive. They need something far simpler, and the setup takes about 10 minutes. What that Ohio woman was doing had a name, and that name quietly disappeared from mainstream gardening guides sometime around the 1960s. It wasn't banned outright. It didn't vanish in a dramatic way. It just stopped being talked about. The information got crowded out. New products came to market. New systems got promoted. And the simple, free, bucket-based methods tea-hat families had used for generations got quietly replaced by things that cost money. What Edna was doing was a form of what old-time gardeners called water rooting, a technique that predates packaged soil by centuries. The basic idea is this: greens and leafy plants don't get their energy from dirt. They get it from water, from light, and from the dissolved nutrients that water carries. Soil, in a traditional garden, is just the medium that holds moisture and nutrients near the roots. But you don't need dirt to do that job. You never did. You just need the right setup and the right seeds. The timing isn't a coincidence. The American commercial fertilizer and soil amendment industry grew rapidly through the 1950s and 1960s as new chemical products hit the market, bagged soils, synthetic fertilizers, pH adjusters. There was enormous financial incentive to convince the American home gardener that growing food was a technical, product-dependent science. Extension programs that had once taught simple wartime growing methods started being influenced by industry funding. University programs shifted focus toward large-scale agriculture. And the backyard gardener, who used to just know things, passed down practical zero-cost things, started being told to buy instead. When companies realized that a simple water and bucket system could let families grow their own greens indefinitely without buying a single product, that knowledge had to go somewhere less visible, not buried in a vault, just quietly moved to the back of the shelf behind 100 products that cost money. Follow the money and the story tells itself. Now here's the part they don't explain. Because once you understand the actual science, you realize just how badly you've been overcomplicated. Plants are, at their core, nutrient collecting machines. Their roots exist to absorb water and dissolved minerals. That's it. The soil is just the delivery system, the medium through which roots access what they actually need. Remove the soil, and you don't remove the plant's ability to grow. You just need to make sure the roots still have access to water and basic dissolved nutrients. That's it. That's the whole secret. Think of it like this. Imagine a sponge sitting in a shallow dish of water. The sponge doesn't create the water. It doesn't filter it or transform it. It just holds it available, steady, consistent, accessible. That's what a growing medium does for plant roots. The roots don't care whether that medium is dirt from your backyard or a handful of inert material in a bucket. They care about moisture and a few basic minerals. And here's the beautiful part. Most tap water already contains trace minerals. Add just a small amount of basic nutrients, which you can get from a single bottle that lasts for years, or from a handful of organic material you already have at home. And you've replicated everything a plant root needs to push up healthy, lush greens. I know what the skeptical part of your brain is saying. This sounds too simple. It sounds like one of those tricks that works in theory but not in practice. I get it. I had that exact reaction the first time I read about this. Then I tried it. 2 weeks later, I was pulling greens out of a bucket in my apartment, and my skepticism was sitting in the corner, feeling very embarrassed. Here's where I want you to stop and take a breath, because this list is going to surprise you. To set up one producing bucket of greens, you need A 5-gallon bucket, the kind that comes free from bakeries or restaurant supply stores if you ask, or costs about $2 at a hardware store. You need a net pot or something similar, a small cup with holes in the bottom, the kind that costs pennies. You need a growing medium that holds moisture. This can be perlite, gravel, coconut coir, or even just clean river stones from your yard. You need seeds, which cost $1 or $2 for a supply that will last you months, and you need water with a small amount of dissolved nutrients. A basic hydroponic nutrient solution, which is just concentrated minerals in a bottle, runs about $12 to $15 and will support several buckets for an entire year. That's it. No dirt. No bags of soil, no raised beds, no special equipment beyond a bucket and a cup. All right, let's build this thing. Start with your 5-gallon bucket. You want it clean? Just rinse it out if it's been used. If it's a dark color, even better. Roots prefer darkness. If you have a clear bucket, just wrap it in a garbage bag or a piece of cardboard to block light. Algae grows where light hits water, and you want to avoid that. Cut or drill a hole in the lid of your bucket, or use a lid that already has one. The hole should be just big enough for your net pot to sit in and hang down into the bucket, like a cup sitting in a cup holder. The net pot should hang so its bottom third is below the lid, inside the bucket. If you don't have a drill, you can cut a hole with a utility knife or even a pair of scissors if the lid is thin enough. The hole just needs to hold the cup steady. This takes about 2 minutes. Now fill your bucket with water, about 3/4 full. Add your nutrient solution according to the bottle's directions. Most basic formulas call for about a teaspoon per gallon. So for a 5-gallon bucket, you're using roughly 5 teaspoons. Stir it. That's your nutrient reservoir. This is what's going to feed your plants. Fill your net pot with your growing medium. Perlite, small stones, coconut coir, whatever you have. If you're using stones from your yard, rinse them first. Pack the medium in loosely. You want it dense enough to support a plant, but open enough to let roots grow through. Place 3 to 5 seeds on top of the medium, and press them down slightly so they're just below the surface. Not deep, just nestled. Cover with a thin layer of medium. Place the net pot in the hole in your lid. The bottom of the pot should just barely touch or sit just above the water surface. This is important. You don't want the seeds fully submerged. You want them in a humid environment where the medium stays moist from water wicking up. As the plant grows and roots extend down through the pot, they'll reach the water on their own. That's it. You're done. Total setup time including filling the bucket, about 10 minutes. Set it near a window that gets 4 to 6 hours of light, or put a basic grow light above it. Even a standard LED shop light from a hardware store works fine. And then you wait. Once you set this up, here's exactly what you're going to watch happen. In the first 3 to 5 days, you'll see germination. Small sprouts breaking the surface of your growing medium, pea, hushing up through that little net pot like they've been waiting their whole lives for a chance. This is, I'll be honest, still satisfying every single time I see it. By day 10 to 14, you'll have genuine seedlings with real leaf structure. The roots will have found the water by now and started drinking freely. Growth accelerates fast at this stage. By the end of week 3, you're cutting your first harvest. Snip the outer leaves and let the center keep growing. This is what's called a cut and come again method, and a single plant will keep producing for 4 to 6 weeks before it needs replacing, at which point you drop in 3 new seeds and start the cycle again. 1 bucket, running continuously with staggered plantings, will put fresh greens on your table every single week, indefinitely. I know what the skeptical part of your brain is saying right now. Sure, it worked for one person. Sure, it worked a long time ago, but does it actually hold up? Let me give you 3 reasons to trust this completely. First, longevity. This method isn't a trend. It isn't something a tech startup invented last year. Water-based growing systems have been documented for over 400 years, tracing back to ancient Aztec floating garden systems and through wartime food production programs on 3 continents. Techniques that don't work don't survive 4 centuries. Second, cost comparison. A family that buys salad greens at the grocery store spends somewhere between $200 and $400 a year on packaged greens. The bucket system I just described costs under $20 to set up and under $10 a year to maintain. And those aren't my numbers. That's just math. Third, basic physics. The scientific principle that plants absorb nutrients through water hasn't changed. It won't change. This isn't a trick that relies on some trend or product line. It relies on how plants actually work. That's not going anywhere. Once you've run 1 bucket for a couple of weeks, you're going to want to scale this. Here's what that looks like. The obvious next step is a 2nd bucket. Run it with a different crop. Arugula in 1, spinach in another, maybe a loose leaf lettuce mix in a 3rd. Stagger your plantings by 2 weeks, so you're not harvesting everything at once. 3 buckets, staggered properly, gives you something to harvest every single week with almost no management time. If you're dealing with low light, grow lights are cheaper than most people think. A 2-foot LED shop light from a hardware store runs about $20, and draws less electricity than a reading lamp. Hang it about 6 inches above your plants for 16 hours a day, using a basic outlet timer, another $10 investment, and your bucket setup becomes completely light independent. You can do this in a closet, a garage, a basement, anywhere. For those of you in colder climates, this is actually an advantage of the bucket system. It lives inside. Your growing season is now 12 months long. For those in hotter climates, the same advantage applies in summer. Instead of watching your outdoor greens bolt in the heat, your bucket system sits in your air-conditioned kitchen doing exactly what it does in January. The most common issue beginners run into is algae, green sludge forming on the inside of the bucket or in the water. This happens when light gets to the reservoir. Block the light completely and the algae stops. Keep your lid sealed. If you're using a clear bucket, wrap it. Problem solved. The second most common issue is seeds not germinating. This usually means the medium dried out in those first few days before the roots reached water. Check your water level and make sure the bottom of the net pot is just touching or sitting just above the water line. The medium should feel slightly moist to the touch, not soaking wet, not bone dry. You just learned something that the garden store on the corner of your street genuinely hopes you never figure out. No soil, no bags, no expensive setup, no yard required, no seasonal limitations, just a bucket, some water, a handful of seeds, and a method that families have used for generations to grow unlimited fresh greens for almost nothing. The industry spent decades replacing simple with complicated because complicated sells products. You now know what they tried to make quiet. You're one of the relatively small number of people who understand that the complexity was never necessary. It was manufactured. Right now, today, I want you to do one thing. Go find 3 things. A 5-gallon bucket, a packet of spinach or arugula seeds, and a small bag of perlite or a cup of clean gravel. That's your starting kit. You can have everything in one hardware store trip for under $10. Set it up today, fill it with water, drop in your seeds, put it by a window. That's it. Do that today, and in 2 weeks, you'll be looking at the first real evidence that you don't need the system they built to keep you dependent. If you want more methods like this, zero cost, no product, forgotten techniques that work precisely because they're simple, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what I'm putting out each week. These aren't things garden centers are going to start selling you. They're things people used before there was anything to sell. Drop a comment and let me know which greens you're starting with first. I read every single one. They can complicate the instructions. They can stack the shelves with products you don't need, but they cannot take away the fact that plants grow toward water and light. And you now know exactly how to give them both in a bucket in 10 minutes for free. That knowledge is yours now. Use it.